Who's in my house?
Tick? Michelangelo? What are y'all doing in my house?
How are you doing, MC Popsicle?
Hey, lost little fugitoid!
Hey guys, good to see you. But it is the middle of the night. What do you need?
I'm starving!
Must have soup.
Ugh. Alright, I'll make y'all some food. Oh, I just got an idea. How would y'all like to be on my show, Weird Interviews? What up, party people? It's your boy, MC Popsicle, and welcome to Weird Interviews. What up, party people? It's your boy, the ridiculous ravioli, MC Popsicle. And today, I'm losing my mind. I'm so excited. Today, we are talking to Townsend Coleman, the original Michelangelo the Ninja Turtle, and the original voice of the Tick. I'm super excited about this, but also, check out my shirt. I have a comic coming out called Popsicle Ghost. It's going to come out in a couple of weeks. But if you get this shirt that's available right now, you get a free PDF with every shirt. So make sure to check that out. Also, shout out to my sponsor, The Old Hat Shop. They specialize in amazing hats that are vintage from the 90s. They're absolutely incredible. So check out The Old Hat Shop. And now, let's get going. How you doing today, Mr. Townsend?
I'm good. How are you doing, MC Popsicle?
Hey, I'm very excited about you being here. I am such a huge fan of the Tick and of the Ninja Turtles.
All right.
I was so excited because I love Michelangelo, but I love the Tick too. So I couldn't decide what I was more excited about. But I got the good. Check this out. I got all this cool stuff. This is all just sitting in my room. I got Tick. Got all the comic books in the world. I got a signed Kevin Eastman Ninja Turtles. I got a bunch of the old school Ninja Turtles comics and stuff. I'm a big fan. So this is like Christmas to me.
Well, sweet. I'm glad. Thanks for being a fan, dude. Seriously, if it wasn't for you, there would be no us.
Well, I'm so thankful that you could come on. The first thing I wanted to ask you is, what was going on in your life to lead you down this road of voice acting? Give me a little mini bio. What was going on in your life?
What was going on in my life? Well, let me see. I got married and I had kids and I needed to make money and I wanted to be creatively challenged. No, I'll tell you what it was. So I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. And I was a DJ there. I was a rock jock for 10 years in Cleveland from 74 to 84. And I used to do a lot of theater too. So my days in Cleveland were filled with being on the radio 6 days a week. I was pulling the Ohio lottery numbers on TV every night. I was doing a lot of theater, a lot of musicals. I was modeling. I was doing anything I could think to do in Cleveland in the entertainment industry. So I was just trying to suck it dry, basically, in a good way, but just, try and keep myself busy and creative. And during that time, at a couple of the radio stations I was at, I was the production director, which meant that I was responsible for either recording the local radio commercials for the local advertisers, or rather local, advertiser clients, or taking the tapes. This is back in the days of quarter-inch audio tape, taking the 5-inch reels of tape that came into us from ad agencies and production companies around the country, and transferring those over to what we call cart. And the carts, they look sort of like old 8-track cartridges, and that's what we played our commercials and our songs off of at the radio station. So, if we weren't playing vinyl. So, so that was my job. And so having to record all those commercials, I started being approached by local ad agencies to work outside the radio station and record commercials for ad agencies for their clients, and doing that sort of freelance voiceover work. And I discovered that I could make a little dough on the side doing that, and come to find out that I kind of had a knack for it. I liked it. They liked me. They kept hiring me. Got to the point where after about 3 or 4 years of doing that, I was making more money a year doing the freelance voiceover work than I was working 6 days a week at the radio station. So it just didn't make any sense to me to keep doing the radio. So I quit that after 10 years and was just going to stay in the Cleveland area and do my freelance voiceover work in the Midwest. But at that point, and this is the summer of 1984, I got word that we had to move from the house that we were living in. We were renting, and I had a wife and 3 kids at the time, and so I thought, wow. They said I had to be out by the end of September, and I thought, well, I got to be out before that because I got to get my kids in school settled someplace by the end of the summer. So I thought, if I've got to pack up my house and make a physical move, I am not going to move across town. I'm either going to New York or LA, which had always been my goal. And so I opted to head out to Los Angeles and came out here over the final closing weekend of the Olympics of 1984, and just looked around, found a little place to rent here. And literally 2 weeks later, I was living here. It happened that fast. So yeah, it just was a real turn of events for me that turned out pretty well. And I got an agent within 2 weeks. And within 6 months, I was working pretty steadily. That's when I got my first cartoon series, which was Inspector Gadget. And cartoons was something I never gave a thought to doing. It was just not on my radar. But my agent sent me on an audition for Inspector Gadget, and I got a part on the last 10 episodes of that series and did the voice for a character named Corporal Cape Man. And that's what launched me into cartoons. So that's sort of the kind of the long, roundabout way of saying how I started out in Cleveland and ended up in cartoons. But it wasn't just cartoons that I ended up doing. I ended up doing a lot of commercial accounts and network promos as well. So those were the 3 legs of my voiceover career. And I came out here to be an on-camera actor. But with the voiceover thing taken off the way it did, I opted to just not even bother with that anymore. And so voiceover just became my thing, and still is. Very grateful.
Yeah.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it, MC Possible.
All right, I'll let it pass this once. No, I'm just kidding. That's crazy. Wow. Yeah, I was reading a lot about you, and it was like you're the busiest man in voiceover work. That was like your moniker that it gave you on like Wikipedia or something. I was like, and I looked through all the stuff you've done. You've done a lot of stuff. That's crazy. How did you get involved with the Ninja Turtles?
The same way that I got involved with all the cartoons that I've done. It was just an audition. I was working on a show called Fraggle Rock at the time, and the voice director of that show, a guy named Stu Rosen, came into one of our recording sessions one morning and said, got guys, take a look at this. You're not going to believe what I'm going to be casting and directing next. And he pulls out of his briefcase a copy of a Ninja Turtle comic book. And I'd never heard of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles before. I thought, well, gosh, good luck with that. Yeah. And so, but he brought us into audition, and all of us, we all read for all 4 turtles. And I was just lucky enough to land Michelangelo, and went into that first recording session. Actually, they hadn't decided whether I was going to be Michelangelo or Leonardo, and same with Cam Clark. And so at the first recording session, they just had me do Michelangelo first, and Cam do Leonardo first, and then they were going to switch us on a second pass. And on that second pass, they just never switched us. They were busy with other things, and so they just kept it the way it was on the first pass. And so that's how I ended up keeping Michelangelo. Cam never even got a chance to try it. So they just kept it that way for the next 10 years.
I get it. You did such a good job. In the original comics, the Ninja Turtles it was more about them as a unit, and they all had the same mask and everything. I'm sure you know all this, but
sure.
They differentiated them because you were the first person to play, like your group were the first people to play the Ninja Turtles in anything. Is that right?
Correct.
So, did they have a handle on all the personalities, like right out of the gate? Did they tell you this is who Michelangelo is, or were you kind of playing with it, trying to figure out who he was?
Yeah, no, they had that pretty well figured out. It was quite, as you said, quite different than the comic book was. The comic book was, of course, it was black and white, and they didn't have the 4 different turtles didn't have their colors or the same personalities that they ended up with in our cartoon series. And that really was all largely the work of David Wise. David Wise was the story editor on Ninja Turtles from the beginning, and really is responsible, with Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird and Fred Wolf, who was the producer of our series, to come up with. David was really responsible for coming up with the various personalities, the really distinct personalities that each of the 4 turtles had. Also came up with the concept of their various colors to differentiate them, and their various weapons, and such like that. So he was largely responsible for creating the personalities of each of the turtles. And I've often thought about this over the years. David passed away a couple of years ago, unfortunately, but was such a creative and great guy. And I was thinking, it was really due to largely his brilliance and his foresight to give each of the turtles not just different personalities, but personality types that really covered the bases of so many of the basic personality types that kids would find themselves able to identify with. You had the strong leader in Leonardo. You had in Raphael. You had the brainiac in Donatello, and you had the party dude, the cut up, the class clown in Michelangelo, basically. And so when we go to cons now, we talk to kids. Listen, I'm sorry, I still call you guys kids. 40-year-olds, 45-year-olds who were our key audience, back, 35 years ago, and plus, and so, it gave kids really something to latch onto. And I can't tell you, the number of people we talk to at these cons now that just, regale us with these amazing stories of what the Ninja Turtles meant to them when they were kids, and why they were able to identify with, one of the 4 turtles more than the other 3. And oftentimes, what that particular character gave them in terms of a sense of belonging, a sense of, sometimes a sense of self, and sometimes a real sense of strength in order to get through some hard emotional times when they were kids. Whether it was they were being bullied in school, or their parents were splitting up, or they were dealing with a physical malady, all kinds of things. So really, I will always ask folks at cons, who was your favorite turtle? And almost everybody has one. And I'm always curious to know why. What is it about somebody who loves Donatello the most? What is it about his character, his characteristics, his personality that they identify with? And I'll just love hearing these answers, for why somebody loves Raphael most, or Michelangelo, or whatever, But it really is to David Wise's credit. I think that's what gave this show a hook early on, was the kids not only just enjoyed just watching the adventures, but felt like they really could relate to at least one of the four turtles, if not more. And to give kids something to latch onto like that, I just think is priceless.
Me too. See, that as a kid in that time that was watching it, like when you're 5 or 6 or 7, or you don't know who you are, and seeing a show like the Ninja Turtles, you're like, okay, well, I really like Michelangelo, and so I must be like him. Maybe I'm like him, So, it really does. I think people's personalities really latched onto things at that age, and it can kind of show them who they are, because you're like, okay, I'm not like Raphael. Maybe maybe I am a Donatello. I like playing my Game Boy a lot, and
Yeah, right.
So I think that's very true. Like in my toy box, if you were not a Ninja Turtle or Batman, you just were not invited whatsoever. Or
yeah, right.
Basically. Right. But so did it take you very long to come up with the voice, or did you just have it immediately as soon as they explained it to you?
Well, at the audition, what they do is they give you a sheet of paper that has a picture of the character on it, and then it has a description of who the character is, where he came from, a bit of his background, his personality, that kind of thing. And then some sample lines to read for the audition. So when I go to audition for a show, it's always the picture of the character that I latch on to first. That's what tells me initially what I need to know about the character. Then I read the description to see what they're telling me this character is about. And then I read the lines that this character would say. And I take those three elements and come up with what seems like an appropriate approach for that character for that audition. Well, in the case of Ninja Turtles, in the audition sides that they gave us, in the descriptions, they pretty well had all that stuff nailed. It was all spelled out for us. And in the case of Michelangelo, they said he's the youngster, he's the cut up, he's the party dude, loves pizza. But as far as the voice goes and the personality goes, they gave the example of Sean Penn from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. Okay. Wow. His Spicoli character as being kind of what they wanted Michelangelo to sound like. So I was familiar with that. And so I just kind of did my best, sort of burnt out, kind of, just kind of a chill dude, just a surfer dude, sort of generically, if you will. And I think that's kind of what we all did. But yeah, they used Sean Penn as a prototype for that.
That's funny. That makes perfect sense. That's good they did that, because I feel like that would be very behooving to be like, okay, you're a Ninja Turtle, go. What do you sound like? Like, I don't know what you would even imagine if they didn't give you very specific instructions. That seems like a really tough thing to come up with a voice for, because it's so crazy.
Yeah, well, it can be. I mean, it can be daunting for sure. Sometimes you go to auditions and you look at the character and you just blank. You go, well, I got kind of maybe half an idea or something, but it's nothing really well defined. And so you really have to sometimes, and I'm just speaking for myself, but sometimes I got to, sort of work at trying to pull something out of this particular character that I think is unique and appropriate for the character, and something that'll make the writers or the producers or the casting director light up. I mean, that's what you want, right? So
right. I saw that you did voice work in the new Ninja Turtle video game that just came out. Is that correct?
Right.
The Shredder,
Shredder's Revenge.
Right. I knew it was something like that. Everybody's saying it's really good. Like,
it came out a little over a year ago. Right. Mm-hmm. And so,
was it that? Wow. I've been seeing a lot of ads.
Yeah. It was toward the end of May, beginning of June of last year of 2022. Wait,
wow.
What year are we in? Yeah. So that came out last year, and that was great. It was a really just a terrific experience for us because of all the video games that they've done over the years, of all the Ninja Turtle video games that there have been over the years. They've never used us. They've never used the original voices. It's always just been knockoffs or no voice at all. So it's just sound effects and just fighting sound effects or effort running, whatever. And so this is the first first TMNT video game that has been put out using us original voices. So we were thrilled, of course.
Cool. I was reading a lot. I like video games a lot. So I was reading about Turtles in Time, and apparently that just like rocked the world when that came out. Like that was, I think up until that time, I think it was like the highest selling Super Nintendo video game or something like that, but it was like massive, and that's a very good game. I've been playing it. I play all the games when I interview people, and I've been playing the Tick, which is so hard. Like that's
right.
That's the hardest video game I've ever played. So I would imagine after the Ninja Turtles, you could get a little choosier with what parts you wanted to do, or no?
No? Not really. I mean, listen, you can always be choosy about the parts you want to do, regardless of, what level of success you've had or are at. But no, I didn't feel that way at all. The Ninja Turtles, of course, once it got its traction and, got a couple of seasons under its belt, obviously became pretty huge. And, but for us, it was just another gig. It was just another project that we were working on. Grateful to be on the show for sure, and grateful for its success. But it didn't make any of us feel like, well, now we can command, triple and quadruple scale. I mean, we weren't. It wasn't. First of all, we were working for a producer who wasn't inclined to give us a raise and never did. But conversely, we were watching our pals on The Simpsons each season get more and more exposure and success and money, and they were all negotiating these incredible contracts, and we were just working for scale for 10 years. So, so, I mean, it's not like it went to our heads and we decided, well, now we can demand $1 million an episode or something. Nothing like that. Trust me.
I noticed something very interesting about your work that I don't see with a lot of actors is like you played a bunch of different characters in Ninja Turtles, whether it be for like one episode or a few episodes here and there. So you must be like a really good mimic. Is that something?
Well, a mimic, you say?
Yeah.
No, I'm actually not. I'm terrible. You're talking about, well, mimicking and being an impressionist, or being just a versatile voice actor. They're all sort of different things, when, cause I know what you're saying. I just tried, as we all do, just try and be as versatile as we can to be able to cover a lot of different bases. Because in animation, TV animation at least, the way it works is, they've got their core group of actors as their ensemble cast, right? But they will invariably have more characters in a particular episode than they have actors there in the studio. So it just means that every actor is probably going to end up having to voice another one or two characters in addition to their main character for that episode. And the way it worked back then was our Screen Actors Guild contract was good for an 8-hour session, which was insane. And so nobody ever went that long, or rarely. Most sessions lasted about 3 or 4 hours. But they also had us for 3 voices per contract without having to pay us any more money. So what the producers, of course, would try and do in order to save money is they would have all the actors who were already in the cast for that episode. They would max them all out at 3 voices each, rather than bringing in other actors to play that one character or the 2 incidentals or whatever. See what I'm saying? So all of us, were kind of charged with the responsibility, if you will, of having to do multiple characters, oftentimes in every episode, and so it might seem like we've voiced a million different characters each, but that's the only reason is because of that. And usually they're very small characters. They're not recurring characters. They're just one-shot characters that have, like maybe he's a security guard and he's got one line,
right?
Stuff like that. But if you're talking, go ahead.
What I'm saying is, like, it said sometimes you played Shredder a few times, or like Krang, or like something like that. Was that not right?
Yeah, yeah. So what happened with that, and people bring this up, and I'm always embarrassed about this whole situation, even all these years later, is because what happened was in those cases, it was a matter of that particular actor, in Shredder's case, it was James Avery not being able to make it to a session because he was recording Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, or right. Pat Fraley not being at a session and not able to do Krang, or Bern Thompson because he's on vacation in Hawaii, or Peter Renaday not being able to do Splinter because he's in the hospital. Okay, so what they would have to do is, because what a lot of people don't understand about animation is that the whole process starts when it comes to the actual production of the show. It starts with our voices. So once they get the scripts down and polished the way they want them, then we go to the recording session and we record our voice tracks first, and they edit those into roughly what the episode will be, and then they send those audio tracks of our voices to wherever it's being animated, whether it's in Ireland or Korea or Australia or wherever. And so then the animators actually animate to our voices. So the voices have to come first in order for the animators to have something to animate to, you see?
Right. Yeah.
So if an actor couldn't make a recording session, they still needed to get the voice recorded so that they could animate to it. And right. So they would occasionally have me dummy the voice in so that the animators could animate to that. And my understanding at the time was that then once they did that and the animation came back, they would bring the original actor back in where he missed the recording session. They would bring him back in to dub his voice over the animation. And then would mix that, and that's the way it would go to air. That's not what happened. And so what happened was they would have me dummy in Shredder's voice, or me dummy in Krang's voice, or me dummy in Splinter's voice. Now, in the case of Splinter, I knew it was going to go to air, or I had a pretty good idea that it was going to, because Pete got very sick. Pete Renaday got very sick and needed somebody, ended up being me, to do the voice for a few episodes, and so I knew that was probably going to end up on the air like that. But with the others, my assumption was that they were going to bring Pat back in to dub in his voice, or bring in James to dub in Shredder's voice before it went to air. Well, they didn't do that. They just left my voice track on there, and that's what went to air. And I was so embarrassed at the time about that, because I don't do Shredder. I definitely don't do Krang. I do a bit better on Splinter, but I'm not these guys. The other actors are those guys. You see what I'm saying? So
yeah.
So no, I was never supposed to be Shredder. I was never supposed to be Krang. I was never supposed to be Splinter. And so that's the way that ended up. And yeah, I wish it hadn't, but it did.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but they have side-by-side recordings of all the different people that happen to have had to play those characters at certain times, and on YouTube. And if you watch them, it'll play one, then the next, then the next. You actually did really good. That was why I brought it up in the first place.
Okay. So that's,
I was like,
so that's,
so that's,
well, thanks, man. So that's why you were saying mimic, because that would be a mimicking. But really, the only show that I've ever gotten where I had to do an actual voice match, because what you're talking about, that would be voice matching, and that's not something I'm very good at. I'm definitely not an impressionist. I don't do silly impressions of, celebs and stuff like that. It's just not my thing. But the one show that I did book as a voice match was Fraggle Rock, and only because they were doing Fraggle Rock for an animated version for NBC, because of course it started as a Muppet show, as a Muppet version with the Muppet characters and the puppeteers doing the voices. Well, the puppeteers for Fraggle Rock were too busy at the time to do the animated version for NBC. So they had to cast the entire cast with people who could mimic the voices from the original Fraggle Rock. Okay. So they had to actually match the voices. So it's the first and only show I've ever done where I actually had to do a voice match. And, the original actor's name was Jerry Nelson. He was one of the Muppeteers, one of the original guys with Jim Henson. And he was the voice of Gobo and other characters on the show. And so I just listened to that character and just tried to drill it into my brain before that audition, and auditioned for it and ended up getting it, So that one I did have to actually mimic him and try and keep it going, for the entire series. But it's the only show that I've ever done that for. And that was a lot of fun. I loved working on that show. We got to sing the theme song too, which was a blast.
That's cool. Well, I want to bring you some news. You are good at that, and if you wanted to do impressions, would do a good job. So,
well, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
So, was the Tick just another audition, and you just kind of ran into it?
Yeah, and again, I took a look at the audition sides and saw the picture, read the description, read his lines, and saw kind of how out there, this character was. And so I came up with an amalgamation of references and influences for me that seemed to make sense for this character. And so I did that for the audition and ended up not getting a call back. And I was really bummed because I really loved that character. And so I didn't get it. And as it turns out, that they ended up recording the first episode of that with Ben Edlund, the creator of the character and the comic and the whole shebang. Ben Edlund doing the voice of the Tick for that first episode.
Wow.
And then they decided shortly after the recording session that maybe Ben wasn't the best choice for voicing the Tick. And actually, Ben was telling me this story just a couple of weeks ago, that it was his dad who, when he heard the tracks, said, "You're not the Tick." and so they brought a couple of us back in to re-audition and had a callback for us, and that's when I actually booked the character. And so it was just another audition. It all pretty much starts the same way. Your agent calls you with an audition that you either go to a studio to do, or you record at home. And nowadays it's pretty much all done at home, and you send it in. But yeah, so the Tick started the same way all of them did. From an audition that you get through your agent.
Yeah, I when I was reading about this and like reading through the comics and stuff, Ben Edlund really stuck out to me because he was writing it and he was drawing it, from what I understand, like the comic, and then he did the voice. So he was like down for everything. It seemed like. What kind of person was he? Like, did you spend a lot of time with him?
Sure. Yeah, he was at the recording sessions, and he wrote many of those scripts, or co-wrote many of those scripts. It really was a process that involved a handful of very creative, very funny, very out there writers, and so Ben is a great guy. Oh my gosh, and he's so creative. And Ben has worked as a writer and producer and executive producer on many shows: Firefly, Supernatural, of course, The Tick. And The Tick has had 2 live action versions of it, as in addition to our original animated show. So yeah, he's been very busy over the years, and he's a terrific, really super creative guy. He's got a band that he calls Ghost Tiger. And he is the ghost. He is the Ghost Tiger, and it's a very cool band. He's just super creative guy, and he's just always coming up with stuff, and always got his fingers in various pies. He's Ben's terrific.
So I feel like The Tick is definitely like a parody, but it's broad. It feels broad as far as like it is of the superhero genre and stuff like that. But what did you feel like? I feel like The Tick is trying to like say something very specific, but I can't nail down exactly. What do you think like the overarching theme of The Tick would be to you, or how did you read it?
That the world that the universe is it's a really big place. Wow. There's so much to discover here. I love wheat. It's this sort of silly, simple things that I think the Tick would latch on to. And he's very straight ahead, and he's a as opposed to an evildoer, he's a good doer. He wants everything to be right and to be simple and to be equitable for everybody. He just doesn't want there to be any bad guys out there. So the Tick is like a big kid, with 5-year-old ideals, and how very idealistic in the way that the world should be. And that's what I love about him, because he would get into just the most bizarre situations with this sort of childlike approach and worldview in his head.
Yeah,
in his noggin, as it were.
It's funny, like me and my dad are like, we're very close, but we're as different as can possibly be in the world. And that was one of my earliest memories, is we really bonded over the Tick. For some reason, we both were like, we did this.
Right. So your dad was into that too, into the Tick?
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome, man. Yeah. Keen.
It's so crazy to be talking to you right now and you like being the Tick, because it's such a big part of my childhood. Like it you have no idea. So it's like, it is so cool to get to, like, it's blowing my mind right now. When you just did the tick voice, my brain exploded.
Yeah, well, don't count your weasels before they pop, Dink.
You're going to give me a heart attack. I'm not going to be able to handle it.
Spoon!
Yes. I've been so excited about talking to you. This doesn't happen to me very much because I've done a lot of interviews at this point, but I was so excited last night. I just like couldn't sleep at all. So
well, that's awesome. Thanks, brother. I appreciate that a lot.
And I really appreciate you coming on and talking to me. And like, I've really enjoyed it. Like, you're a very cool guy, and I really appreciate all your work.
Well, dude, that's totally bodacious to hear, because I appreciate you almost as much as I appreciate pizza.
Yes. Okay, my life is complete now.
Cowabunga, dudes!
I have nothing else missing in my life. I'm good.
There you go. I'll send you the bill.
Well, thank you, Mr. Townsend. I really, really appreciate you coming on.
It's my pleasure, MC Popsicle. Yeah, you have a good one. Thanks, I appreciate it. And how about giving me a little turtle power with me? You ready?
Okay,
let's
go.
2, 3. Turtle power! Whoa.
Whoa.
And that's about it, everybody. Thank y'all so much for watching. Please make sure to subscribe to my page. Also, Mr. Coleman, thank you so much for coming on. I really respect you. It was great talking to you. And also, guys, check out a word from my sponsor. Please check out Ramicus.com for all the MC Popsicle merchandise. We got buttons, shirts, phone cases, posters, everything. So make sure to get on over to Ramicus.com and get you something. Stop! Before you do anything else, check this out. This is a vintage 90s Ninja Turtle figure that was modeled after the turtles from the movie. I love it. And this is a newer turtle figure. I also love it. You should go to the Toy Stash on Instagram and follow them. They have vintage and new toys. And if you're a toy collector like me, you need to know about them. Follow them on Instagram right now. Another thing you need to do is check out Step On It Rugs on Instagram. They are insane. They made me an MC Popsicle rug. Anything you can imagine, they can make a rug for it. Hit them up. Also, shout out to my shoe sponsor, Solsfing. They make amazing future sneakers that are just bananas. Please follow them on Instagram. You will love their selection. And if you're thinking, hey, I want those sunglasses, and I want the sunglasses you wear in your movie Popsicle World, make sure to hit up Filthy Shades. Also, if you live on the Gulf Coast and need help with your pool or hot tub, hit up Emerald Coast Pools. They can fix everything and get you swimming again before you can say Baba Booey.